Welcome to Music Tech Explained, the visual approach. My name is Edgar Rothermich, author of the best-selling book series Graphically Enhanced Manuals. In this first one of a two-part video, we will have an in-depth look at the library browser in Logic Pro 10. Okay, let's start with the library window. Although this might seem like an easy topic that many Logic users would say they are familiar with, I guarantee that you will be surprised how many hidden details there are that are not so obvious. The main functionality of the library window is to search and locate settings that you then load onto a specific track, like patches or plugin settings, as we will discuss in this video. But before we are getting into the details about the library window, I like to clarify two terms: a browser and an inspector. They are essential in understanding the functionality of the library window and to understand and also predict what you see, when you see it, and why you see it. Let's start with the term browser. A browser on a computer is usually a user interface in the form of a window that shows you content. Different browsers show you different type of content. The most famous browser of them all is the web browser. It shows you websites, content that is available on the internet, the World Wide Web. Logic Pro 10 also has browser windows. Here they display a specific type of content that you might need to access in your project. There are two dedicated buttons in the upper right corner of the control bar to access those browsers. One is the Loop Browser button. It toggles a window pane on the right side of Logic's main window, showing two tabs on top. These two tabs represent two different browsers. By clicking on a tab, you determine which browser is displayed in that window pane, which means you can view different types of loops. Here you can display either Apple loops or untagged loops. The second browser button in the control bar is just labeled Browser, which also toggles the window pane on the right. This window pane has three tabs. And again, each tab switches to a separate browser that displays a specific type of content. The project audio browser displays all the audio files in your current project. The media browser displays all the audio and video files on your computer. And the All Files browser lets you navigate to any file on your computer. Most browsers have one specific component, and that is a search or filter section. For example, the upper section of the Apple Loop browser provides various buttons and controls to restrict the content that is played in the browser. As you can see on my Loop browser, it contains 24,402 items, the entire content that can be displayed in that browser. By selecting the tambourine button, for example, I restrict the displayed content so the browser only shows the loops marked as tambourine, which are 73 items. Keep that browser functionality in mind when we discuss the library window in a minute. But first, let's talk about the second term that we need to understand in the context of the library window, and that is an inspector. An inspector is a special type of window used in many content creation applications. The important part is that an inspector window always depends on another window or an object in another window, like a selected text in a text editor. That means whenever you look at an inspector, or more importantly, change any parameter in an inspector window, you are looking or changing something somewhere else. And as we will see in a moment, that aspect is extremely important in the understanding of the library window. Let's have a look at the implementation of the inspector in Logic. One of the window panes in Logic's main window is a so-called main inspector. You can toggle it by pressing the inspector button in the upper left corner of the control bar, or just by pressing the I key. The main inspector will play an important role in the functionality of the library window. So let's look at it a little bit closer. First of all, the main inspector is a window pane that contains multiple inspectors. As a default, it shows three: the region inspector, the track inspector, and the inspector channel strip at the bottom, displaying 2 channel strips. By the way, I have a special tutorial called Inspector Channel Strip on my website logicprogem.com that explains all the little details about those 2 channel strips. As I just mentioned, the inspector is dependent on an object that is selected in a different window or window pane. Here is a dependency for those 3 inspectors in the main inspector. First, the region inspector. It shows the parameter values of the currently selected region in the workspace. Whatever region you select, the region inspector follows that and displays its values. Please note that you can select multiple regions to change a specific parameter value for all those selected regions at once. And remember, anytime you change a parameter value in an inspector, make sure to know which object, in this case which region, is selected. If you don't pay attention, you could edit the wrong regions and potentially mess up your project if you don't realize it right away. Now the track inspector. Technically, it follows the same inspector principles. Whatever track you select, either the track header or the corresponding channel strip in the mixer window, the track inspector will display the parameter values for that track. There is one little detail you have to pay attention to that also affects the library window. Unlike the region inspector that can show and let you edit parameters of multiple selected regions, the track inspector can only show the parameters of one track at a time. This is important to understand because technically you can select multiple tracks. However, the track inspector only shows the parameter of one of those tracks. So which one is it, you may ask? This is a little bit tricky, so let me demonstrate that. The easiest way to find out which track's parameters are displayed in the track inspector when you have multiple tracks selected is to look at the header of the track inspector. It displays its corresponding track name. The other way to see which track's parameter are displayed in the track inspector is the track number. The track number is one of the so-called track header components, the elements that can be displayed on the track header. The key command Option T opens a popover that lets you configure the track header, which component you want to display on the track header. As you can see, when you select multiple tracks, then all those tracks are highlighted. However, the area of the track number on the far left is only highlighted for the single track, and that is the selected track displayed in the track inspector. And here's a little caution. When you open the popover for the track header configuration again, we also see another component called color bars. This lets you choose specific colors for the area of the track number on the far left for each individual track. One downside of this option is that you lose the visual feedback which track is displayed in the track inspector if you have multiple tracks selected. Now let's look at the third inspector in the main inspector, the so-called inspector channel strip at the bottom. Its functionality is very simple. It displays the same track as the track inspector above. That means switching between selected tracks in the tracks area switches the track inspector and the channel strip inspector at the same time accordingly. Okay, so far for the quick review of the browser and inspector functionality. Now let's find a look at the library window and see how all that plays together. Let me start with a few housekeeping items. The library window is not open by default when you start a new project. However, there is one exception. When creating a new project, Logic automatically opens the New Tracks dialog to create at least one track for your project. And on that New Tracks dialog, there is a little checkbox labeled Open Library. That, you guessed it, automatically opens the library window when you create that track. The library window is a window pane that slides out on the left of Logic's main window. Please note that it cannot be opened as a standalone window. You have 3 commands to toggle the library window. You can use the key command Y, like the last letter of the word library, or press the library button in the upper left corner of the control bar. Or if you like to go on a trip, travel up to the main menus with the mouse and select Show or Hide Library, the first item in the View menu. But wait, there is another option to open and close the library window, and that has to do with the most important element of the library window. It is called the Library Focus Triangle. We will dive much more into that tiny triangle thingy throughout this video. Here's just how you can use it to toggle the library window. If you move your mouse on the inspector channel strip left of the setting button, either on the left inspector channel strip or the right inspector channel strip, you will see a little gray triangle appear. This is the super important library focus triangle. It will also appear next to the MIDI effects slot, the audio effects slot, and the software instrument slot, but only if something is loaded on those slots. Once that gray library focus triangle appears next to the setting button, you can click on it to open the library window. Now that library focus triangle turns blue to indicate that the library window is open. Clicking on a blue library focus triangle will close the library window. You can also double-click on the divider line between the library window and the main inspector to close the library window. By the way, double-clicking on a divider line of any window pane in the main window to close them works for most window panes. Before discovering all the powers of that little triangle, let's go quickly over the user interface of the library window. The library window has the following sections. The first section below the header is the track icon. It is the same that is displayed on the track header and the track inspector. Please note that the track icon is not only a display, but also has various click functionalities depending on the selected track type and the position of the library focus triangle. For example, with an instrument track, when moving the mouse over the icon, it reveals the Instrument Editor button, and that opens the plugin window when clicked on. The bottom of the library window has 4 buttons. Please note that the library focus triangle also has a role on how some of those buttons work. Needless to say, you better know about that functionality before clicking on any of those buttons. Now the big area in the middle of the library window is the actual browser section, with a similar functionality that we discussed at the beginning of the video about browsers. A few important aspects about that browser in particular. This browser area, like any other browser, shows content. However, and this is important, it shows different types of content. For example, patches, plugin settings, EXS instruments, and even available MIDI ports. What type of content is currently displayed depends again on the library focus triangle. And that's where you have to pay close attention to before clicking anything. Let me repeat, be careful when clicking anywhere in the library if you are not 100% sure about the possible consequences. The different items of a specific content, patches, plugin settings, etc., are organized in categories and subcategories, similar to folders and subfolders. These categories are indicated by a triangle to its right. That means if an item has a triangle, it represents a category. If you click on a category, it will show items for that category in the next column to the right, which could contain more categories indicated by their triangles. If the folder hierarchy has more levels than displayed columns, then you will see a horizontal scroll bar at the bottom. The width of the library can be resized by dragging its divider line left or right to show 1 column or up to 3 columns. Here's a big warning. Items displayed in a column that are not categories are hot. That means when you click on it, you will immediately load that setting onto the current track. No problem when you click on a category, the one with the triangle, because this only reveals its content in the next column. However, an entry that has no triangle is an actual item, for example a patch or a plugin settings, and clicking on such an item will automatically load that item without any warning. That item will override any current settings on the track. Luckily, you can use Command-C to undo that action. Remember, we saw earlier that most browsers have a section that lets you restrict the displayed content. That functionality is also available in the library window in the form of a search field above the columns. You enter a simple search query to display all the items that match that name. The browser now changes to show two columns with the name of the found items on the left and the creation date on the right. Similar to other search fields, you have an X button on the right to remove that search query and a magnifier icon to click on that reveals previous search terms. The library window has one specialty when a drummer track is selected. It will show an additional area that lists all the drummers that you can select. I explain that functionality with all the details in my book Logic Pro 10 What's New in 10.3. Now finally, we will concentrate on that also powerful little library focus triangle. By the way, what about the specific word focus in library focus triangle? Focus is a common term used in computers. In a situation where you have multiple windows open on your computer screen, for example, you have 3 documents open and you type on your keyboard, then the computer has to know in which of the 3 windows you want to enter the text. That's very simple, because you first select that specific window by clicking on it. By doing so, the selected window now gets the so-called key focus. Clicking on a different window changes the key focus to that window, and you can now enter text in that window. That little triangle, the library focus triangle, that appears in the inspector channel strip is doing a similar thing. It changes the focus on the library window. That means it changes the displayed content that is currently active in the library window depending on where you place it on the inspector channel strip. But instead of typing text into a document, we want to load a setting from the library window to a track. The library focus triangle provides that functionality, but it involves a little bit more than just selecting a window to have key focus. Loading a specific setting from the library window onto a track using the library focus triangle involves 3 steps. Number 1, the track destination. First, you make sure that the track is selected that you want to load a setting to. If it is not selected yet, click on it in the tracks area or the mixer window. This will display the track in the inspector channel strip and makes it the target track where you load any settings to. Number 2, which component? Once the correct track is displayed in the inspector channel strip, the library focus triangle comes into place. Its purpose is to point at the component on the channel strip that you want a setting to load to. You can manually place the library focus triangle next to a specific slot, for example, a specific audio effects plugin to load a plugin setting to that plugin, or place it next to a MIDI effects slot to load a plugin setting for that MIDI effects plugin. Placing the triangle next to a software instrument slot lets you load a plugin setting to that instrument plugin. And placing the triangle next to the setting button on top of the channel strip lets you load a patch, a setting for the entire channel strip. Now number 3, changing the displayed library content. Placing the library focus triangle at a specific spot on the inspector channel strip has a useful side effect. Once you place the triangle to the component on the channel strip that you want to load a setting to, you don't have to search for an available setting in the library window. The library window automatically changes its displayed content depending on the placement of the blue library focus triangle. It dynamically updates its displayed content to only show the settings files that are available for that specific component the triangle is pointing at. Think of this as a browser with a built-in inspector functionality, which means the displayed content of the browser window depends on what is selected in a different window, in this case the inspector channel strip. Here is a graphic with an overview of all the steps you have to be aware of when using the library window. The first component is the currently selected track, the target track. Now the inspector channel strip and the track inspector display that track. Once you open the library window, you will see the blue library focus triangle. Remember, when the library window is closed, then the library focus triangle will disappear and you will only see it as a gray triangle when you move the mouse to the left of a button. Now if you get that concept of that three-part connection or dependency, it is easy to understand what happens when you make a selection in the library window. We just follow the steps backwards. If you click on an item in the library window which represents a specific setting, then that setting is loaded into that slot the library focus triangle is pointing at, which is the channel strip of the currently selected track. Okay, that concludes the first of my two-part video about the library window. Please continue to watch the second one to learn all the aspects about the library window, with plenty of material to discover, to try out, and to implement in your workflow. Thanks for watching and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to read my free Logic and Pro Tools tutorials and check out the books in my graphically enhanced manual series. By the way, on Apple's iBook Store, you can download free samples of all my books in the special interactive multi-touch iBooks version, the best way to learn a software application. All the links are available on my website,